we have just a fantastic webinar planned for everyone today. I know I'm really excited about this. I've been, gosh, since I met you in Newport, Rhode Island, Stephen, and I heard you speak for our attendees, it was just such an inspirational talk. I was so excited to have you back to join us today.
Thank you.
And so thank you for that. And again, Haley, thanks for being our wonderful moderator. I'm going to go ahead and look for Keith. He's going to join us. We have two incredible sponsors who've been with us from the very beginning, Global Litigation Consultants and HMR. So I'm so excited to have you meet Keith today with Global Litigation Consultants. I'm going to bring him in so you can meet him and hear a little bit about what they do. You should be here with us.
Hi, Ginger.
Hey, how's it going, Keith?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you again for being such an incredible sponsor. Please, if you get a minute, just let us know what you do at Global Litigation Consultants, and then also a little bit about what you guys do there.
Okay. Well, thanks for having us. We really enjoy these seminars. You guys have a great speaker today and on all the previous ones I've watched. So we really appreciate what you do there. Global Litigation Consultants is an alternative legal service provider that facilitates the litigation process from document retrieval to settlement demand prep. We have a team of in-house nurses, and they provide detailed and accurate medical summaries. And then on the settlement side of the case, we provide financial consulting on a range of issues from government benefit compliance to special needs trust and structured settlements. So if you have any complicated litigation or financial questions, please give us a call. We'd love to see what we can do to help your case.
Fantastic. And I know the company's based out of Clearwater, Florida, and you live in beautiful St. Petersburg, Florida. Is that right?
That's correct.
Fantastic. And you guys work with people all over the country, right?
We do. So yeah, no matter where your firm's located or where your clients are located, we can assist you.
Fantastic. Well, Keith, I want to make sure that everyone gets your contact information at the end of this webinar, but thank you so much for all you do, and thanks for being with us today.
I appreciate the introduction. Thanks.
All right. Let's see, I'm going to play a special video for you guys from Kyle over at HMR. And again, thank you so much to HMR.
Hey everybody, this is Kyle Kinberger with HMR Servicing. I'm the National Sales Manager for the company. Wanted to say a special thanks to Ginger and John at Connectionology for giving us an opportunity to come and speak to everybody today. At HMR, we handle all the medical funding needs for uninsured and underinsured plaintiffs who need medical treatment. And that can range from anything involving traumatic brain injury, spinal cord injury cases, burns, amputations. We also do a lot of pre-settlement funding here at HMR. You know, our goal is to serve the people who can't get the medical treatment they need because they've been involved in some type of accident. We work with thousands of law firms around the country and hundreds of medical providers, and we look forward to helping you if you need any assistance from us. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to y'all.
All right, fantastic. And now, again, I wanted to let you guys know that we're going to bring Ted Mullis with HMR in a little bit later because we have a special announcement. One of you are going to win 4 bags of special Peruvian coffee, which is freshly roasted, and I can't wait to announce the winner with him a little bit later in this webinar. So again, thank you so much to HMR and to Kyle. I'll make sure that you get his contact information as well. Now, before we begin our webinar, I wanted to let you know that I'm sure you're going to have a lot of great questions. And at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A box where you can just upload anything that you would like to ask. And Haley is going to ask those questions towards the end of the webinar. And now I'd like to introduce to you our wonderful moderator today, Hali Marsocci. She's an incredible attorney who works with John Romano out of the Romano Law Group down in West Palm Beach. She's spoken on several webinars that we've done so far, and we love having her back every time. She concentrates a lot of her practice of law on a variety of personal injury matters, wrongful death cases, and product liability litigation. And also, before she worked with John, she worked as a law clerk for the Office of the State Attorney for the 19th Judicial Circuit in Fort Pierce, Florida, and the Guardian Ad Litem program, which is in Port St. Lucie, Florida, while attending law school. She served as a law clerk for the Romano Law Group. That's how she got started, and that was during the summer prior to her graduation from Florida Coastal School of Law. And additionally, Hali is a certified legal intern for the Office of the State Attorney for the 7th Judicial Circuit, which is also there in Florida. And she worked on several felony and misdemeanor cases during her final year of law school. And as a law student, Hali was selected as a member of her nationally recognized Moot Court Honor Board, which earned multiple Dean's List awards as well. So we are just very, very, very excited to have Hali with us, and I'm very happy to introduce you to her. Hali, take it away.
Thank you, Ginger. I'm just so excited for today's webinar. I think it's a truly special webinar that will leave you inspired. We have an incredible speaker this afternoon for you, Stephen Benvenisti. He is a partner at Davis, Saperstein, and Salomon. It's one of the largest personal injury firms in New Jersey. For the past 7 years, Stephen has been included on the list of the National Trial Lawyers Top 100 Trial Lawyers and on New Jersey's Super Lawyers list. He is one of 3% of attorneys that is designated by the Supreme Court of New Jersey as a board certified trial attorney. He has been in practice for more than 20 years and has devoted that entire career to representing personal injury victims, focusing that career on dram shop cases and TBI cases. He is also the chair of the New Jersey Board of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, a former director of MAD National, and is the current president of the Brain Injury Alliance of New Jersey. Stephen has received over 30 awards, including a U.S. Congressional Citation, a U.S. House of Representatives Certificate of Special Congressional Recognition, and NJAJ's highest honor, known as the Gold Medal for Distinguished Service and Citizen of the Year Award. Additionally, Stephen has authored a book that is titled Spring Break, A True Story of Hope and Determination, and that is about one of his most significant cases in his career. And he has been an international keynote speaker at over 70 conferences. We are so excited to have Stephen here with us today for this truly inspirational webinar. And so without further ado, I'll pass it over to you, Stephen.
Thank you so much, Hali, and thank you so much, Ginger. And Ginger, just from a technical perspective, do I share screens now, or will I be able to? Okay, so I'm going to share screens now. And thank you. So thank you for that very kind introduction and everything that you do at Connectionology and to all the sponsors. First and foremost, I want to share with everyone who's part of this seminar right now my heartfelt wishes for good health to all of you during these unprecedented times, and to your families. I really, truly hope that things get better for all of us, but I hope they are well for you. And I'm truly honored to be a part of this seminar. And the title is Alcohol and the Highway, It's Personal. And I remember speaking with Ginger about it when we were talking about drunk driving. The first thought that came to our minds, putting aside even attorneys, is just how personal it is. Every single one of you who's part of this seminar, you know someone whose life was changed dramatically, or even others whose lives have ended because of something that is so preventable: drunk driving and drug driving. And to my fellow attorneys and colleagues who work at plaintiffs' firms throughout the country, we know that when we get that phone call and it's a case and we hear about a crash that's so horrific, in the back of our minds, we know that alcohol or drugs were involved. And a third of the time it involved alcohol and drugs, and the harm that it causes is just horrific. So what I'd like to accomplish in this seminar is two things. I'd like to accomplish, first, just to give you some tools to maximize the recovery in your drunk driving cases. And I recognize that every one of your states have different laws, but I am very hopeful that you do learn certain things that you can apply to your own cases, because all of us share the same goals. What we want to do is maximize the recovery to our clients, because our clients, when they come to us, they have so many questions that can't be answered. They first hope that the criminal justice system will bring them full circle, will bring them justice, will bring them vindication. But we know that that's not what happens. But I think we all agree that when clients look back at their personal injury cases, even if it didn't necessarily turn out to get an award that is as substantial as they deserve, they really felt like it was that process that allowed them to come full circle and to let them feel like justice was truly served. And I want to do this seminar in the context of the most significant case of my career. All of us have cases that last a lifetime with us, where we think about that case so many times in our personal lives, in our professional lives. Well, the case that I'm going to be telling you about is a case that I've recognized that more than any other case I or any lawyer I know, it has such an unusual impact. In fact, I have heard from literally thousands of people who've heard the story of this case. They've shared that just by hearing the story of the case, that their lives have improved. And I genuinely hope that when I'm done, you'll look back at the story of this case and you'll think that your life has been improved as well, because that is definitely what the goal is. But first, I want to share with you some tools that I hope are helpful to you in your cases. One challenge that we have in New Jersey is we have cases where horrific and preventable crash occurs. We have clients and clients' families that are changed forever, some clients who pass away, and the defendant knows that if they don't want the jury to hear that alcohol was involved or drugs were involved, all they have to do is stipulate to liability. And I'm sure my fellow attorneys throughout the country have this similar frustration. And it really does a disservice to the whole system and to our clients that a jury can't learn that alcohol was involved or drugs were involved that changed everything in our clients' lives. So some of the tools that I encourage you to use, if you're able to in your particular state, is always name the DRAM defendant and the social host defendant. As you know, DRAM is short for dram shop, but it's essentially the licensed alcoholic beverage server. And the social host is the private social entity where our clients or our clients who have passed consume the alcohol prior to getting behind the wheel of the car. Even if that avenue of relief isn't necessarily going to be one that is a large payer in the case, we do owe it to our clients, but really what's more powerful about it is it's sending a message to the attorney for the drunk driver and to the insurance company for the drunk driver that if they let this case go to trial, that the jury is going to surmise and they're going to learn that the driver was drunk before they decided to so selfishly get behind the wheel of the car. Another tool, psychological harm. I guarantee you, and I know most of you will agree, that if we have a heart-to-heart with any one of our clients who are a victim of a drunk driving crash, that they're going to tell you that in addition to the physical harm that they've sustained, that there's such a dramatic emotional harm, including every single time they're either a driver of a car or a passenger in a car. They'll share with you that every time they're in the car, they're afraid. They're afraid that it's going to happen again. They're afraid that they're going to be in another crash involving a drunk driver. And judging by the amount of drunk driving crashes there are in our country every single year, judging by our losing 10,000 people every single year in this country to this completely preventable crime, it's a realistic fear. So I recommend that you have a psychologist or a psychiatrist talk to your client and articulate in writing in the form of a report that that psychological harm is one of the many harms that our clients sustained in the crash that was completely avoidable. And then what happens through the damages portion of the case, the jury actually learns that the driver of the vehicle was drunk before getting behind the wheel of the car. And that's why it's so important to have that dialogue with our clients. I also recommend in your pleadings to include punitive damages. All of us plaintiffs' lawyers know how much carriers hate seeing punitive damages in the pleadings. If your state allows it, include punitive damages in the pleadings when it involves a drunk or drugged driver. Ironically, it was my law firm that had one of the most successful outcomes in a case involving punitive damages that were in the pleadings. And ironically, that was the case that was the catalyst to getting the law changed in New Jersey. We had a soft tissue case involving a herniated disc where our client was injured by a drunk driver, and the jury came back with an award of $500,000. And we also followed it with a jury trial with that same jury on the issue of punitive damages. And it was a successful trial. We got additional damages for the punitive damages, but it was taken up to our Supreme Court, and unfortunately it was reversed. And now we are no longer able to include that as an element of our damages in our drunk and drug driving cases. But if you're able to do it in your state, I encourage you to do it. Another thing that's interesting, and unfortunately, all of us lawyers have heard it. When we say to a carrier with confidence or to a defense attorney with confidence that if they dare let this case go to a jury, that we're going to get an excess verdict, and that's going to expose their client, that's going to expose their insurance company. And some of those carriers, more so than the attorneys, have the nerve to say, well, then my client will just file for bankruptcy protection. I don't think that is ethical. I don't think it's appropriate, but I know every single attorney and and people who work at plaintiffs' law firms have heard that from the carriers. But what they may not realize is that there's Bankruptcy Code 523. Bankruptcy Code 523 says that a person cannot be discharged from bankruptcy for damages that were caused by drunk or drugged driving. A lot of carriers don't know that. A lot of attorneys don't know that. And I am not suggesting that you try your case to verdict and force the person that you're suing and the judgment against to file for bankruptcy. But I do know that when the insurance carrier and the attorney for the defendant hears that, this is going to be one of the many factors that's going to get them to offer what is most appropriate, which is the maximum damages for our clients that they so deserve. Typically, it requires an underlying conviction in a town court or in a state criminal court for that bankruptcy provision to come into place. And now if I could tie what I've just shared with you, and especially the issue of alcohol on the highway and it being personal, with what I always consider to be the most significant case of my entire career. This case meant so much to me, and it still moves me to this day, that I decided to author a book about it. And the book is called Spring Break, A True Story of Hope and Determination. Why did I author the book? Because this case involved a college student who was on spring break. And when he was on spring break, he was walking and he was hit by a drunk driver. And even though it was a catastrophic accident with catastrophic injuries, even though his family was asked to consent to his organ donation, it really moves me that every single person who's ever heard the story of this case have shared that it's changed them in a positive way. Spring Break is sold on Amazon. 100% of the proceeds from Spring Break are donated to charity. And Ginger was so kind to offer to send the Amazon link to all of you. But what I will share is if you send me an email after this seminar with your contact information, with the best address to mail the book to you, my office will gladly send you a copy of Spring Break. And Spring Break is the type of book where I was already contacted by producers in Hollywood. There's a movie script and it may even be a movie one day. But my only request of you is if you do read Spring Break, reach out to me after you read it and share with me what your thoughts were. So Spring Break is a story of a college student who had everything going for him. He grew up in a small town in New Jersey with his parents who were both immigrants, with his brother and two sisters, and he played sports. And we knew as lawyers, as you all know, that if we want to demonstrate in a case the harm that was caused, if we want to demonstrate in a case what's been taken away from this earth, the best way to do it is to tell the story of that person before the crash that brought you to that courtroom in the first place. So I'm going to be sharing exhibits that we used in this case that are actual exhibits so you can just get a feel as to what was taken away in this case. This student was in a great position to have a wonderful life, did well in high school, played football, was active in karate, got decent grades, he had a girlfriend, the kind of life that we want every single young student to live. He then graduated and got accepted to the College of New Jersey. And as lawyers, we wanted to demonstrate that when this student got to the College of New Jersey, we wanted to show that he took the bull by the horns in so many ways. Athletically, he wasn't that large of an individual, but every single year he would win weightlifting tournaments at his college. A month before he was hit by the drunk driver on spring break, there was a wrestling tournament at the college. And this student had never wrestled, but there was a wrestling tournament where they allowed walk-ons. And he walked onto the tournament. He came in second place. So we thought that would be an interesting fact to bring out in the case. A week before this spring break, there was an American Cancer Society 1-mile race at the student's college. He ran in the race. He came in first place. So we used the medal that he won as one of the exhibits in the case. Socially, he was in a fraternity. He had a girlfriend. He even was voted the college's homecoming king. Academically, he was maintaining a 3.65 out of 4.0 grade point average. And had he not been hit by the drunk driver, 6 weeks later, he was going to be graduating from college with high honors. So he decides what better way to celebrate having such an amazing experience in college. He decided that he and his fraternity brothers would take a road trip to Daytona Beach, Florida for spring break. And the sad pedestrian crash of that vacation occurred on that spring break. So this became a very, very important factor in the case and in the book. We asked this student's parents, what was their most vivid memory of their son before that spring break vacation? And they both had the same answer. They said it was the Thanksgiving break a few months before. He sat down with his parents and he told them that after almost 4 years of college that he had never been happier. And he told his parents that he was convinced that the best time in anyone's life had to be when they were in college. His mother remembered reassuring him that as glad as she was that he was getting the most out of college, she told him that his good and positive memories in life had really only just begun. At least that's what she thought. The father said he'll never forget. He was waving goodbye to his son and his fraternity brothers pulling out of their house in a small town called Montvale, New Jersey, and it was in the month of March. And the parents said if they would have known at that time that a week later his fraternity brothers would be returning from that spring break vacation, but their son wouldn't be, they said they would have jumped in front of the car. They would have done anything to stop them from driving to Daytona Beach, Florida. They took the Garden State Parkway south to I-95 south. And the way the fraternity brothers described it, they said whenever they passed one of those old-fashioned signs welcoming them to a new state, they said they would get more and more excited to get to Daytona Beach, Florida. So through New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, they had reservations to stay in a motel in South Carolina. They decided to drive straight through Georgia, and they got to Daytona Beach, Florida safely. All of the students immediately called their parents to tell them they arrived safely. The mother of this college student said that from the time she waved goodbye to her son pulling out of the driveway to the time she got that call, she said she couldn't sleep, she couldn't concentrate, but she was so relieved when she got that phone call from her son because she knew he was safe in Daytona Beach, Florida. At least that's what she thought. Daytona Beach, Florida was beautiful. The sun was shining. There were spring breakers from all over the country, promotions, contests, giveaways. One fraternity brother said that whenever he walked, if he took in a breath of air, he could smell that ocean air. And for those of you who go to the beach, you know what that smell is like. This case centered around one date on that spring break, and the date was March 20th. You know, one interesting and sad and powerful fact that all of us have in all of our personal injury cases is that one date in the calendar year to our clients and their families will always be the anniversary date of the most significant, the most memorable, perhaps the most unfortunate date of their entire lives. March 20th was when this college student was hit by that drunk driver. According to his friends, he went to the beach that day. The sun was shining, he was swimming, he was playing volleyball. If you've been to Daytona Beach, Florida, there were times when they allowed you to drive your car on the sand alongside the water. Just as this college student was wrapping up his day on the beach, MTV was doing some sort of a national spring break special. And something about this college student just caught their eye. Maybe it was his smile, maybe it was the energy that he had. But for the last hour on the beach, on the day of the night he was going to be hit by a drunk driver, he was on an MTV spring break special. Now, as lawyers, we were strategizing in the case. Do we need to bring out this MTV experience in the case? I mean, we were on a roll. By that point in the case, we felt like we had already demonstrated that this college student was on top of the world, but we decided to bring out the MTV experience because it was like the icing on a cake for a wonderful life. College student went out that night, bragged about MTV, called as many people as he could back home to tell them to record MTV. As this college student was in the last bar of the night, he didn't know that a couple of blocks away in another bar that there was a young man having a great time with his friends. Except his friends were named Jack Daniels, Sam Adams, Johnny Walker. Unfortunately, he was drinking. So this college student's finishing his time in his bar. He's leaving the bar. He's walking on the sidewalk. He could see his hotel getting closer and closer as he's walking. He's with his fraternity brothers. He doesn't know at the same time that this young man is now having his last few shots. He's waving goodbye to patrons and bartenders and friends. Everybody knew he was drunk. Nobody tried to stop him from driving. How often do we hear that? As this college student and his friends just need to cross the street, this drunk driver is now, according to witnesses, driving with his lights off at over 50 miles per hour And then as this college student goes over the double yellow lines just to get to the other end of the sidewalk where his hotel is, this drunk driver suddenly goes in the wrong direction, loses control of his steering wheel with his lights off, and he crashes into this college student's body. Crashes into his legs, crushing them upon impact. His torso smashed against the hood of the car. There were people in the area who were asleep in their motels and hotels who heard a weird explosion sound, enough for them to call the police. It turned out that weird explosion sound was the sound of this college student's head and face going through the outside windshield of the car, and his body was then thrown 70 feet before it landed face down and unconscious. Now, as good lawyers, as all of you on this call, on this Zoom call, understand that when we don't have a video of a crash, we hire the best engineers and accident reconstructionists to literally recreate these crashes at regular speed and in slow motion. And that's what I'm about to show you. Traffic should be coming from the left to the right in your screen. And now in slow motion. According to his friends, they were on the sidewalk and they heard an explosion behind them. Then they turned around and they saw this college student's body tumbling in a way that nobody should. They said they ran so fast to his body and spring breakers started to crowd around this college student's body. One spring breaker from Kentucky, happened to be his birthday when it happened, saw everything. And he said that he will never forget seeing that college student lying face down on the pavement. He said from his knees down, his legs were disfigured like the letter S. He said blood was coming out of the college student's ears, his nose, his mouth. Spring breakers who didn't know him were crying right in the street. And the scene was out of control until the police arrived. And while most of the police did what they could for this college student's face down, motionless body, one police officer described scouring the area with a flashlight. And 30 feet away from the body, he finds a wallet. He then compared the face on the driver's license in that wallet with the bloody unconscious face of this college student. As this college student's body was rushed to the nearest trauma center, at the time it was called Halifax Medical Center. They thought about medevacing him by helicopter, but they decided to drive instead. This police officer goes back to the station to look up this family in some town he never heard of called Montvale, New Jersey. So in the middle of the night, 1,000 miles away from that police department, according to the family, they were all asleep. The mother, the father, the brother, the two sisters, and all of a sudden they heard the phone ring. The mother said as soon as she heard the phone ringing, she knew something bad must have happened to her son. The father answered the phone and it was a police officer. He described that their son was a pedestrian in some sort of motor vehicle crash, and he didn't have more information other than keeping the lines clear and to expect a phone call from the hospital shortly. So the parents described waking up the brother and the two sisters. It was the middle of the night, and everybody was trying to think positively about that next phone call. But those positive thoughts were really shattered with that next phone call because it was a doctor from the hospital in Florida. The father answered the phone. The father said that the doctor had a calm tone about him, and it was unemotional, and the father at first thought that that was a good sign until the doctor started getting into his son's condition. He said, your son was in the pedestrian motor vehicle crash. From an orthopedic perspective, his legs have been crushed below the knees. Portions of the bones in his tibia and fibula bones, which we know are the two bones between the knee and the ankle that allow us to stand, have literally been traumatically ejected from his legs. They didn't think they were going to be able to save his left leg, and they asked the doctors for permission. They had already contacted doctors in the middle of the night to plan out construction and reconstruction of their son's lower legs, but they said most seriously, your son has lost a lot of blood. He's already receiving blood transfusions, and our CAT scans have revealed what appears to be severe brain damage to your son's brain's frontal lobe, cortex, and brain stem, and there's internal hemorrhaging, there's internal bleeding, and there's internal damage. Now picture for a moment that phone call. All of our clients' families get a phone call like this, where one moment they're doing one thing and the next moment they're hearing the worst news of their entire lives. The father didn't know what to ask. And he said, well, doctor, how bad is it? The doctor said that their son is at the deepest level of unconsciousness. There's a score called the Glasgow Coma Score, and their son was at a 3, which is the lowest level. Now, like most people nowadays do, they went to Google. And I'm going to ask Google, what is the prognosis when someone has a Glasgow Coma Score of 3? Glasgow Coma Score 3, prognosis. So the parents are hearing this all at once. And then the doctor says to the parents, come down to Florida today. And he actually asked the doctor actually asked the parents for permission to consent to their son's organs being donated in the likely event he died while they were in transit to Daytona Beach, Florida. So all of this in one phone call. The parents said that their life was redefined at that moment. They immediately did what they could during a busy spring break to get to Daytona Beach, Florida. They drove to Newark Airport, so worried about their son. The mother said that they were able to get a flight to Daytona Beach, Florida that same day. And she said her only memory of that flight was all of a sudden she was on an airplane with all these students her son's age, and everybody was in such a good mood. And she started to convince herself that maybe when the plane landed in Florida, her son would be in the airport, give her a big hug and a kiss, tell her it was a big misunderstanding. She unfortunately was going through denial. The plane landed in Daytona. They rushed to the hospital. They were brought to see the doctor, and the doctor explained that they almost lost their son while in flight. He had a hypotension incident where his blood pressure got dangerously low. But before being brought to see their son's body, the father asked the doctor, he said, you know what, we have people in New York and New Jersey and throughout the country, everybody is praying for our son to wake up out of this coma. But when we spoke this morning, you said our son had severe brain damage. What are we praying for? What is our son going to be like when and if he wakes up out of this coma? The doctor said that's a difficult question to answer, but the gauge that he gave them, he said clinically around the world through this day, if someone is in a coma for more than 24 hours, clinically that is considered severe brain damage or severe traumatic brain injury. And the longer someone is in a coma, the more significant the damage, the more significant the injury, the more significant the disability. And with those thoughts in mind, the parents were brought to see their son's body. And the following images I'm going to show you are exhibits from the case that show what these parents had to see next. We asked the parents if there was a way to describe the emotions that they were feeling when they were looking at their son in this condition. They said they still were in a state of shock. It was only days earlier when they gave their healthy son a hug and a kiss goodbye, but now they were so sad because his mind and body had been stolen from him. The doctors reminded them, as they do today, in the year 2020, there is no cure to brain damage or brain injury, especially a severe traumatic brain injury. The parents said they felt so alone, even though they had so much love and support from family members, even friends in Florida. Until someone has a family member or a loved one in a condition like that, there's no way to describe what a lonely feeling that is. They said there was an overwhelming amount of anger that they were experiencing. The parents said that this drunk driver didn't get a scratch on his body, and look what that guy did to their son. They said they also felt helpless. They asked permission from the doctor that morning to make a recording of their son's girlfriend and family members cheering him on, and they played that recording to their son while he laid in a coma, and they said there would never be any reaction on the monitors. He just lied there. But they said their biggest emotion was fear. The mother quite simply feared one of her children predeceasing her. She said it's not normal for any parent to imagine a son or daughter dying before they do. In her life, the definition of family was the number 6, 2 parents, 4 kids. The number 5, it was so unthinkable, it was so unacceptable. The father said that his fears were going beyond that, and he didn't like the way he was thinking. He was thinking things like, is he doing a disservice by not consenting to his son's organ donation? Did the family pick the organs to be donated? And then the father started thinking about, well, he knew of a cemetery where his family was buried. Does he have to get a cemetery plot for his son? And he didn't like that his mind was going there, but no one can ever know what a parent or family member goes through when they're faced with these decisions. Every single day that their son remained in this coma, these concerns became more and more realistic. After 3 days, the doctors knew that it was really bad. One doctor had a vacation that he was going on, and he half-heartedly said to his colleagues that he didn't think that college student would be alive when he returned from the vacation. And then after almost 2 weeks, one morning, at 10 o'clock in the morning, something dramatic happened. Now, the college student didn't die. When the mother and the brother of the college student were in the intensive care unit room, all of a sudden, this college student opened his eyes. They were startled at first, and they got the doctor's attention immediately. They immediately went and called family members and friends to let everyone know that consciousness had returned to their brother and their son and their friend. The rest of the immediate family went to Newark Airport and Kennedy Airport in New York and New Jersey to get flights to Daytona Beach, Florida. Everybody wanted to be there to talk to their brother and their son when the respirators were removed. Everybody thought their prayers were answered. And then a few days later, when the entire family was together in the intensive care unit room, actually it was the surgical intensive care unit room, and the respirators had been removed, they questioned whether their prayers were fully answered. This college student didn't recognize his family. He guessed that his sister was his girlfriend. The college student kept insisting that his own name was Herschel Walker, a famous football player from the 1980s. They kept asking the student, "How old are you?" The student responded that he was 180 years old, that he weighed 1,000 pounds. He would scream sporadically for no reason. Words that were common to his vocabulary were not coming to him when he was trying to articulate his thoughts. That's aphasia. He could still read words and sentences, but he couldn't tell anybody what he just read and what it was about. According to doctors then and today, these are all normal, permanent residuals following severe traumatic brain injuries, or as they put it to the family, the severe brain damage that their son had sustained. The doctors explained that even if he didn't get a scratch on his body, they can't tell the family whether the impact of the brain damage would result in his ever being able to walk again. He had these metal devices in his legs called Hoffman devices, and it was unknown whether they would even be able to save the legs. But there was really nothing for the family to hold on to that could give them confidence or give them hope. But fortunately, the mother finally insisted that the family find joy in the fact that their son, that their brother was alive. And where there's life, there's hope. And the whole family started to rally around them. And then this college student developed pulmonary embolisms and blood clots in his lungs and his legs. He was back in intensive care. They didn't know if he would live or die at that point. So what you've just learned of and what you've just heard is the way this case was presented years ago. And it was presented to you in a very condensed manner. And one thing that we weren't able to do in the case that I'm able to do when I present about it is I'm able to share with you whatever happened to this college student. I'm able to fast forward people to the present day and address thoughts that may be going through your minds, such as, did this college student survive? Is he in long-term care? Because that's what they were saying in the acute care facility, that he would need long-term care for the rest of his life. Did he lose his legs? Can he walk? Was there any improvement to the severe brain damage that he sustained? How is he doing today? Well, first and foremost, what I'm most relieved to share with you is that this college student is still alive today, and that of course is wonderful news. But here's what's really special. Do you know if you were to ask this college student today, if you just asked him, how are you doing? Do you know what he'd tell you? He would tell you he's doing great. He would actually tell you that he's happier today, even happier than, remember I told you on that college spring break beforehand when he told his parents that the best time in a person's life is when they're in college? He would tell you that right now is the best time in his life, and he thinks he's one of the happiest people that he knows. The reason why I'm so gratified to share that with you is because the story that I just told you about the most significant case of my entire career, the book, and hopefully a movie one day, Spring Break, A True Story of Hope and Determination. Well, you just learned the story of me when I went to college. This is my story. I'm not accustomed to doing this program via Zoom, and I'm normally looking at a crowd and an audience, and there's a pause, and I ask for a show of hands from people. as to whether they saw that coming, whether they knew that the story that I've been telling about my client and the most significant case of my entire career was actually the story of me. Haley, I'm sorry I kept this secret from you, but I didn't tell Haley, the moderator, that it was my story because I wanted her to be surprised. You know, a couple of weeks after those photographs were taken, according to my family, I first opened my eyes in the surgical intensive care unit of Halifax Medical Center. According to my family, my mind had been stolen from me and my body had been stolen from me. According to the doctors, the condition was permanent. I lost my ability to do everything I've ever been able to do. I wasn't able to feed myself. I wasn't able to clean myself. I wasn't able to articulate my thoughts with words that were common to my vocabulary. I wasn't able to read and comprehend what it was that I was reading. I was 21 at the time, and I kept asking the doctors what happened to me, when would I get better? And that's when they told me that there is no cure to brain injury or brain damage, as they put it then. So I was alone. But I made a pledge back then. I pledged that if there was a way, in spite of what it said in the medical literature, for me to have a 100% full recovery of everything that happened to my body physically, everything that happened to my brain, I promised that I'd spend the rest of my life doing everything I could do to try to end drunk driving, because a drunk driver did this to me, and everything I could do to try to help people who are living with brain injury. So I spent half a year in the hospital. I underwent 15 surgeries. And in time, about 3 months it took, but I learned how to use a wheelchair. And that to me was the most exhilarating feeling of freedom that I had ever had. And then after about 4 or 5 months, I was able to stand up. And after about 8 months, I was able to walk on crutches. But then there was everything that happened to my brain. And I will share that with you in a second. But what was scary for me was I noticed, and all of us have heard this from our clients who sustained brain injuries and physical injuries, there was a frustration that my physical injuries were improving, but my brain was not improving at that pace. And I went from walking with crutches to using a walker to walking with a limp and then wanting to run again. And I kept asking orthopedic surgeons when I could run again. And they, of course, couldn't have an answer for me. So I decided to learn how to walk fast, and then faster, and then faster. And as awkward as it was, I was soon jogging. Now I'm happy to say I run every single day. I run in the 10K and did it in under an hour. And I don't show you that video to toot my own horn or show off. I really just do it to give credit where credit is due. I was fortunate. No fault. PIP, when this happened to me, was in its last few months of having unlimited medical benefits for every single accident victim. Could you imagine if it was like that today? I believe Michigan may be the only state remaining that still has unlimited PIP, but I got my life back for so many reasons, but I couldn't have done it without unlimited PIP at the time. Because of my unusual recovery, because of my brain injury having gotten better, I have been asked and continue to be asked about once a month to fly somewhere in the world to speak at a medical conference. I am asked to speak with neurologists most often because they want to know how I did it, how I overcame my traumatic brain injury. I have a neuropsychologist who examined me and said I had a full and complete recovery. How did I do it? My answer to them sounds obnoxious. I say them to, you have to be a lawyer to understand. Now, why do I say that? I say that because I mean it. Because what do all lawyers have in common? We all went through the first year of law school. After being in this terrible, terrible victim of having a severe traumatic brain injury and the victim crash that I had been in as a pedestrian, I knew that I had a long road ahead of me. And after being discharged from the hospital, I went back to college, and it took me a year to finish the last 6 weeks that I had. And my law school was kind enough to delay my admission by a year. But when I began law school, I was in no position to do it. I was still not remembering words that were common to my vocabulary. I was still having such a difficult time comprehending what I was reading. But I decided to give law school a shot. And as soon as I got there and started my first year of law school, I wanted to quit. It was the most miserable experience of my entire life, second only to the injuries I sustained in being a victim in this pedestrian crash. But every single attorney on this Zoom call knows that there's something different about the first year of law school. How we come with confidence from our respective colleges and universities, and for the first time we are truly humbled academically. I had a real reason to be humbled. I had a severe traumatic brain injury, severe brain damage. I couldn't comprehend reading. I felt like I was reading another language, but I stuck it out. And then I noticed something was happening. As the days and the weeks and the months of the first year of law school were progressing, I noticed that my cognitive deficits were going away one by one by one. I wasn't repeating myself anymore. Words were coming to me. My reading comprehension level was improving dramatically. At the end of my first year of law school, I felt like I was cured. I felt better than before. But like any law student or good lawyer, I wanted evidence. So that summer, while all of my law student peers were all excited to go to the beach or to work in law firms, I'm probably the only law student in the history of law students that was excited that summer to go be evaluated by a neuropsychologist. I brought my medical records. I explained to the neuropsychologist that I thought I had a full and complete recovery from my severe traumatic brain injury. He cautioned me with regard to my self-confidence, but after a full day of very difficult and humbling neuropsychological testing, to his surprise, but not to mine, he could not find anything wrong with me. That gave me so much confidence that I went on to complete the second and third year of law school, graduated in the top portion of my law school class. Within 8 weeks, I was sitting for the New Jersey bar exam, the Pennsylvania bar exam that I didn't even study for, and the multi-state bar exam. Passed those bar exams, my scores were high enough to waive into other states. And I'm not saying this to show off. I'm not saying to toot my own horn. I'm just saying it to give context to all of you in a way that all of us can appreciate. We all went through the first year of law school. And to me, I am so grateful that I had that opportunity, because it was the experience of the first year of law school that allowed me to overcome all of the cognitive deficits surrounding my severe traumatic brain injury. So before I became a lawyer, I learned what it was like to be a client. I had a lawyer. He was my injury lawyer. And all I knew at the time was how to be an injury client. And fast forward to when I became a lawyer, and now a lawyer representing those injury victims for decades, I'd like to share with you the most powerful lessons I learned being in the unique position of having gone through what I went through. And I'd like to share a few of them with you. The first is, why did my parents select this attorney? Well, I asked my parents that, and they shared with me that while I was in a coma in a hospital room, they were outside the hospital room with the yellow pages on their lap, and they literally were going through the yellow pages, calling attorneys. And here's what all the attorneys had in common. They were all very nice. They were all very experienced, very well spoken. They all shared why it was that their law firm was the right law firm to select. But one lawyer was different. One lawyer said to my parents, you know, we have time to talk about the law. We have time to talk about my experience. How are you doing as parents? How is your son doing? How is your family doing? Now, to this day, I genuinely believe that every single lawyer in the Yellow Pages who got that call had the exact same sentiments, but perhaps they were reluctant to lead that call with those statements. But that was the reason why my parents selected that lawyer. And in retrospect, even though ultimately it was an uninsured motorist case against a bar that did not have any liability insurance, we have no regrets, and I have no regrets for the lawyer that they selected, and he truly was the best lawyer. And the criteria that my parents used was a bit unorthodox, but it definitely worked. Another lesson I learned, having first been a victim, having first been a client before I became a lawyer, did you know that every single time you call your client, can you finish the sentence? What do they think you're calling about? They think you're calling them with a settlement offer. Now, I know right now you're pausing, you're saying, that's impossible. I mean, I explained to my client that there's a whole process, that they first have to get medical records. There has to be an insurance company that has to become involved. They have to evaluate it. They have to have a reserve. In spite of all that, even me, I was already in law school. I had known lawyers when I was a client. And every time my lawyer called me, I thought he had a settlement offer. I encourage you to have a heart-to-heart with your client after their case settles and ask them that same question. And you may be surprised to learn that every time you call them, no matter what the context is, that they think you're calling them about a settlement offer. So I encourage you to set the expectations early, but even in spite of you doing that, and with all the disclaimers that you give, that's probably going to be in the back of their mind when the phone rings. I recognize, as attorneys, we're all very busy. I've been doing this type of work exclusively, personal injury cases and personal injury trials, for decades. And I recognize that when I call my client, as with all of us, we usually have a specific question that we have for them. I encourage you in every single one of the calls to please remember to ask your client how they're feeling. Not just because they're going to have an answer for you, not just because you're going to be learning something that you may not have known yet about your client's condition, but also because you are going to be solidifying the bond that you already have with the client. When someone is injured through no fault of their own, they want to answer that question. They want to know that their attorney genuinely cares how they're feeling. And I recognize that you, of course, genuinely care how your client is feeling. But if you forget to ask that when you call your client, you may be having an incomplete conversation. I encourage you to do that. There is a lot of comfort that's derived to a client when they know that they can trust their lawyer. And I'm sharing this with you because for our clients, before the accident ever happened, life is already very difficult. Life already puts so many burdens on our shoulders. And when that burden is compounded by dealing with injuries and everything that's involved with being an accident victim, it gets even more complicated. And then one more addition to that complication is when a client has to figure out who is the best lawyer to represent them. Once that is done, I'm here to tell you that you have, by representing your client, alleviated such a big burden that was already on their shoulders, and that you do not need to continue to reinforce in them that they've made the right choice. You've already provided them with relief in knowing that they've made the right choice, and that that responsibility in their life has now been given to an attorney, and that you will take care of fulfilling the needs that need to be fulfilled in your representation of that. You probably didn't expect to see this. Lesson from the #1 marriage family counselor. What I didn't tell you about my parents is that my father, who's 82 years old now, that for years before this happened to me through the present day, has been and continues to be a full-time licensed marriage and family counselor. He has his PhD in psychology. Unfortunately for our profession, he represents many lawyers and many judges as well. When I knew that I wanted to be an attorney one day, I asked my dad, I said, "Dad, what advice do you have for me about becoming an attorney?" And his answer surprised me, but he stands by it today. My father said the #1 lesson that he hopes that I derive from him and his experience in counseling lawyers for his entire career through today is to leave the office. What does that mean? He told me before I even passed the bar that one day when I'm a lawyer, pick a time where there's essentially a rebuttable presumption that I am going to be leaving the office every single day, and stick by that time. Because as we all know, we could easily work every waking moment on our files. There are so many important reasons to stay in the office and continue doing the work that we need to do. But he promised me, as we all know, their work will be there the following morning. So, by picking a time every single day when you are going to leave the office and sticking by that time, not only are you going to be healthier, are you going to be stronger, you're going to be a better spouse, father, mother, sibling, son, daughter, friend, attorney for your client. And if you haven't already done it, do it, because we are in a very, very stressful profession We do have the weight of the world on our shoulders when we are representing a client, and taking the advice from who I consider to be the #1 marriage and family counselor in the world, leave the office at a given time that is reasonable, is going to bring so many rewards to you. And finally, I'd like to close before any questions you may have with what I've always called the secret to success. And I talk about that in Spring Break, and that's really the theme of the book Spring Break, A True Story of Hope and Determination. Before I share with you what I guarantee is the secret to success for each and every one of you who are part of this seminar right now, I want to share with you what my definition of success has always been since I've been a teenager. I've always believed that a person has achieved the highest level of success when they have achieved happiness. I've been challenged with that definition. People have said to me, no, you achieve success when you have wealth. My response to them is, let's look at the wealthiest people in society right now. Movie stars, actors and actresses, professional athletes. These are people who have more wealth than one can imagine, but those same groups of people have the higher prevalence of depression, drug use, even suicide. So it is not wealth. But after waking up from a coma, being in a lost state with severe brain damage, with my legs feeling like they were on fire 100% of the time, with painkillers doing nothing, with my life as I knew it having been torn away from me, I was at the lowest emotional level that a human being could ever be at. And I was convinced that that was my new reality and that would never change. But midway through my half a year of hospitalization, I started to realize that the only reason why I was so happy before this happened to me, it wasn't because of my family relationship, it wasn't because of my girlfriend or my athletic trophies or my grade point average. The only reason why I was happy was because I chose on a regular basis to think about things that made me smile, to think about happy thoughts. In fact, the only reason why anyone is happy or unhappy at any given time, it's based on what it is that they're thinking about. Please know that your emotions are controlled by what it is that you're thinking about. How can I say that with such certainty? Think about driving to work and taking 30 minutes every single day. You could be driving to work and you could be thinking, oh, I don't want to work on that brief. I don't want to have to appear before this judge. How am I going to retire in this economy? Whatever you're thinking, if you're thinking negative thoughts and unhappy thoughts in that 30-minute drive to work, guaranteed you're not going to have a happy ride to work. Take that same 30-minute ride to work and you can be thinking, I'm looking forward to seeing Sally or Joe or Haley when I get to the office, or Ginger. Or you can be thinking, oh, I can't wait for the weekend where I'm going to be doing whatever it's going to be doing. Even if you're daydreaming about when you win the lottery one day, in those 30 minutes to work, if you're thinking about happy thoughts, you're going to have a happy drive to work. If you apply that to your entire life, when you have the time to have downtime and thinking that, you are going to be a happy person. Now, this isn't about just thinking positively, although thinking positively does follow. It's just the very logical statement that your emotions are always controlled by what it is that you're thinking about. So my advice to you, if you have not found happiness, or to what I would consider to be the highest level of success, I encourage you, in addition to therapy for some, or even medication if you need that, why not supplement it with this formula, and you too can find happiness, and you too can find what I would consider to be the ultimate success in life. So before questions that you may have, I wanted to thank you for allowing me to share the story of what happened to me when I was a senior in college. I want to also show you my website. It's linked to my firm's website, contractforlife.org. My email, steven@dsslaw.com. If you would like a copy of Spring Break, you don't have to go on Amazon for it. My office would be happy to send it to you. But before questions that you may have, I just wanted to thank you. I wanted to thank you because the lawyer, Elon Krugman-Cotty, who was from Florida, who my parents selected because he first spoke about how my parents were doing and took a genuine interest always in how they were doing and how I was doing. Tragically, he was in a flight show in Florida. I believe it was in Daytona Beach, or it may have been at Gainesboro, Florida, when his plane had crashed and he perished. And I wish I had more of an opportunity to share with him just the incredibly positive impact that he's had on my life, just because he was my personal injury attorney. And I want to thank all of you on this call, because each and every one of you, whether you work for your law firm or whether you're in the role as an attorney, you are doing so many wonderful things for your client and your client's family, well above and beyond just getting them a monetary damages award. You're bringing them justice that they're not going to get through the criminal justice system. You're giving them a feeling of vindication that they don't normally get. You're allowing them to come full circle from the horrible experience that they've had through the personal injury that they've had. And you are the only voice that's out there right now. We're the only voice, and the law matters. I know that sounds so basic and obvious, but boy, do we realize now more than ever, boy, does the law matter. And it's us lawyers who lead the fights when it's regard to changing the laws for the consumers in our state. When this happened to me, PIP, no fault in New Jersey was unlimited, as I shared with you earlier. There was no limit. I had a blank check for my medical treatment. 3 months later, the law that matters changed. And 3 months later, because of the insurance lobby, the maximum benefits was $250,000 for an accident victim. 10 years ago in New Jersey, the law changed where people can completely waive the right to get benefits for medical bills after a crash. And I know the law is different in Florida and every other state. We are the ones who get these laws to change. So in addition to the wonderful work that you're doing for your clients, please continue to be advocates for your clients in getting the legislature to change the law, because not only you're going to be helping your clients today, you're going to be helping countless people in the future. So thank you for everything that you do from the bottom of my heart. That's all I have, unless you have any questions. And I can't actually see you right now, so if you have questions, I guess you would post it. And then Haley, if you could please read any questions that may exist.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Stephen. I am blown away. You kept a big secret from me, but it was worth the wait. And it was a very, very special and inspirational story. So I thank you very much for today. Ginger, do you want to go ahead and go into questions? Want me to go into questions, or do you want to do your announcement first?
Yeah, we can go ahead and do the announcement. But again, I just wanted to say, I hope everybody understands why I just thought it was so important to have Stephen here today. Obviously, seeing this in person, I was in tears after I heard you speak. I know that I'd be curious to know if anyone on here actually, you know, like I said, if you had an idea that this was coming. But again, you inspire so many of us. And that hearing you speak that day, it just stuck with me. You know, how long has it been? What, 2 years, 3 years now?
It seems like, yeah, and it was, but I'll never forget meeting you for the first time, and I thank you. So. And
we are offering so many different webinars every single week. We've been doing these webinars since the pandemic started in like early April. But this was one that was just different, very unique, and it just tugs at your heartstrings. And I wanted to share it with all of our attendees. And you being a lawyer, I mean, you guys all know very well, you know, the amazing work that you do for your clients. But I'm positive that there's probably some people on here who had no idea this was coming.
I had no idea.
They didn't know what they were in for today. But anyway, so thank you so much, Steve. And I'm going to go ahead and bring in, because I know everybody's waiting to find out who won. So while you guys are thinking about your questions, you can submit them in the Q&A box down at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to go ahead and bring in Ted Mullis from HMR. And he is going to announce who the lucky winner is today of our coffee giveaway. And all of our past winners, by the way, said they love the coffee. So I'm very excited to see who's the winner today, Ted.
Yeah, so first off, that was an amazing story, Stephen. So thank you so much for sharing. So I'd like to announce that Ian, it's Bertschausen from the Parnell Law Firm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, is our winner of the coffee. So congratulations.
Ian. And by the way, fantastic firm out there in Albuquerque. Usually every year we always do a Santa Fe seminar, and it's our most special seminar, I think, that we do of the year. We were actually going to go earlier this year. Actually, we would have been there this month, but with the pandemic and coronavirus, we had to put a halt to it. So hopefully next year we'll be able to reschedule it. But that is a fantastic firm out of Albuquerque. So highly recommend him. Congratulations, Ian. I know, Ted, you're going to reach out to him after this webinar, right?
Yep. And I'll get that coffee. It's going to be fresh roasted and sent right out. So.
Thank you so much. I think it's so special that you guys do this giveaway for our attendees. I even love the charity aspect of it. So continue doing it. I know everybody appreciates it, Ted.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. And now, Haley, I'm going to hand it back to you so we can answer some of those questions.
All right. Thank you, Ginger, and thank you, Ted, and congratulations, Ian. All right, Stephen, we do have a few questions from some of our attendees. The first is, do you think that your views of life show in the courtroom at trial and bring you more business recommendations?
They have to. I thought that I had an ability to separate what happened to me from when I'm in the role as a personal injury attorney, and that I thought that would be best for me and best for my clients. But I soon learned that the best gift I can give to my client is for me to remember what it was like to be an accident victim. And that's why I put my heart and soul into every single case. The hard part is when I have a case against a drunk driver. Well, it's not hard anymore, but I try very hard not to show just how disgusted I am about the harm that the drunk driver did in something that is completely preventable. But the answer is yes, and judges have noticed it, even judges who did not know my story, that there was something different about my style in the courtroom, and that's when I would share after a jury verdict, of course, the reason why it is truly personal to me. But thank you for that question.
Do you often share your story with your clients, is our next question.
I only share my story with clients who have contacted me because they learned about my experience. Or I'll do it if there's certain times in the relationship where I think it's appropriate. And let me tell you why. Even though I have been cleared by a neuropsychologist, even though, thank God, I did well on the bar exams, and I'm the 2% of the attorneys in New Jersey who are certified in our state as a civil trial attorney, I just imagine if you were to walk onto an airplane and meet the pilot, as some of us do, and if the pilot were to proudly tell you at that point that he had a full recovery from a severe traumatic brain injury, that might give pause to some people. And I don't want to give pause to any of my clients beforehand, but usually by the time the case is over, my clients do know that, and every single one of them who know my story genuinely appreciate it because they realize that I genuinely understand what they've been through, and it shows from the moment I'm hired until the moment of the jury verdict or the settlement. Thank you.
The next question is, are your children inspired by your story, and have they talked about a future career in law?
I don't think so, or perhaps maybe I'll realize that one day. They know my kids were born into this life where dad had some sort of an accident and dad's on TV and dad flies to different countries to talk about it. So it's just part of their life. I'd like to believe that they're inspired, but they've never actually voiced that to me. That they're wonderful kids. They try very hard. And, but I mean, I don't want to look at you and give a false answer and say that my son, and daughter tell me regularly how inspired they are by dad. As a matter of fact, I remember Barack Obama, and I'm not at all comparing myself with the level of a presidency, but he shared what it was like at his dinner table. And he joked that you would never know that he was leader of the free world because of how his kids would always bust his chops. So, so no, thank you for the question, but I'm hoping my kids are inspired, but they've never shared it with me. I'm just dad to them, so.
All right, our next question is, what is your program like when you speak to schools? What kind of reaction do high schoolers usually give?
I am so gratified that when students hear my story and I present it the way I presented it to you, the result is that drunk driving literally stops at their high schools and their campuses. There's a college that's not far from my office in New York, and they contacted me 8 years ago because they had a serious drunk driving problem at their college, because every bar was a driving distance away. And even with Uber and Lyft, students were still getting into drunk driving crashes and arrests. They asked me if I would speak at their college, and I said, sure. And then they asked me if I would do it on the Sunday of Labor Day. And I said, sure. Every day for the past, now it's 9 years, I have spoken to the freshman class at that college, and for the past 9 years, there hasn't been one drunk driving incident, no arrests, no accusations. And I'd like to believe it's the story that I just shared with you earlier that is the motivation for that happening. So thank you for asking that. And that's why any high school that I ask, and I speak about 20 or 25 times a year at high schools and colleges, they have in their budget an honorarium to pay. And I don't accept the honorarium. I just name different charities and they just write the check directly to the charity. But thank you.
That's awesome. One of our attendees wants to know what the name of who your lawyer was in your case.
My lawyer was Elon Krugman Kadi, and he was out of Gainesville. And he was also a very active pilot. And unfortunately, it was that hobby of flying that ultimately led to his passing.
Did you ever meet the drunk driver who hit you?
I remember thinking in the hospital about this drunk driver. Half a year in the hospital, and I was picturing one of those drunks that you would see on a cardboard box in the corner of a street with an empty bottle of Jack Daniels. And that's what I had always imagined the drunk driver to be like. Whether it's right or wrong, a couple years later when I was looking better, I went with my girlfriend to Daytona Beach, Florida, and I wanted to go to the bar where he was drinking. I went to the bar and he was there and I got to look at him. And it was really scary. And he was a very clean-cut guy in his 30s. Of course, we all know that drunk drivers come in all shapes and sizes. And I didn't approach him. I just looked at him. And to this day, he doesn't know that I actually saw him. And I didn't approach him because according to that one gentleman from Kentucky who saw me in the roadways, according to my fraternity brothers who saw me in the roadways, they said they cannot get that vision out of their mind of what they saw. And if there's a part of this drunk driver's conscience that still remembers what he did to an innocent pedestrian decades ago, I didn't want him to have to see me looking better 2 years later and perhaps then alleviating any shame or guilt that he may have.
What criminal repercussions, if any, happened to this person and how old was he at the time?
He was 32 years old, and for my fellow attorneys in Florida, I think you know how difficult it is to get strong criminal drunk driving laws against people who are accused of drunk driving. This happened to me in 1989 when I was 21. I'm now 53. And at the time, the laws were not very strong. And to add to that, I was not driving. I was a pedestrian. All of the witnesses were not only pedestrians, they were pedestrians who had been drinking. It was spring break in Daytona Beach, Florida. And they were students from all over the country. So knowing, having been a volunteer prosecutor in a town for years, knowing how difficult it is already to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt, the prosecutor in Florida did it with laws that weren't as strong as they are now, with witnesses that were all over the country, and with my family really focusing 100% of their efforts on me and not necessarily contacting the prosecutor. And I was just some student from New Jersey. I wasn't a local resident. And I'd like to believe that that didn't have an impact, but it wasn't as big a story as it would have been if I would have been a Florida resident, in my opinion.
Do you have any anger against the drunk driver who hit you?
Do I have any anger against the drunk driver who hit me? I'm glad you asked that. And for all of my fellow attorneys on this call, I think you'll find that accident victims don't really harbor anger against the perpetrator. I believe, from my perspective, is because I just didn't have energy for anger. Anger is such a powerful emotion, and I needed all of my energy to try to get to the best possible me that I could possibly get to. For my family and for family members of my clients, I understand that there was anger, but it's just not an emotion of mine that I had even to this day. And it isn't that I had forgiveness. I didn't need forgiveness. My main hope was that he just never did it again and never put other people's lives at risk. But to this day, no, anger is not an emotion that I felt.
What advice do you have for people with TBIs who truly will never get better?
My advice to whether it's someone who has a traumatic brain injury that will never get better or any physical injury to never get better, that they shouldn't gauge their happiness or their success by getting better, because they will find that even people who've never had any type of disability like that still have such a difficult time finding happiness, and that happiness and joy in life isn't derived even from one's health. It's truly derived from what I shared, where I said that one's emotions are controlled by their thoughts. it's important not to compare yourself with who you were beforehand, because all of us get older. All of us are not the people we were decades earlier. So that's not where our thoughts should be. Our thoughts should really just be in the present moment and what we're thinking about. And as long as they are, no matter what their condition is, in a position where they're thinking happy thoughts and they're happy people, whether they get better or not should not be the focus or the goal in life.
You know if the drunk driver who hit you is a repeat offender?
He was a repeat offender, and I'm glad you asked that. And you may wonder why I don't include that in my underlying story. He was a repeat offender who had done it 2 times before, and I had served time. And as a matter of fact, ironically, his judge, the judge that was sentencing him, was trying to extend the sentence because there was a pending law that was going to have a mandatory minimum for serving time. And ultimately, he was able to extend the sentence, but his lawyer was then able to reverse it because of the fact that the judge tried to do something that was based on a future law, and that's what allowed him to be behind the wheel when he hit me. The reason why I don't include that in the underlying story is because I never want people to ever separate themselves from someone who's a multiple offender. I want my message to be to everyone, never to drive after drinking. I've asked tens of thousands of students to take a pledge, never to drink and drive. And they follow me on Instagram, and it's I Pledge for Life, I Pledge FOR Life, where students take the pledge to never drink and drive. And I found that when I talked about the offender being a repeat offender, that students sometimes put that offender in a different category, saying, I'll never be a repeat offender. Bottom line is, if we're going to be drinking, we should not drive.
Absolutely. One of our participants would like to know your thoughts regarding medical prognosis, given your experience.
Medical prognosis in general, I think that prognosis should be taken seriously. There's so much information out there now to learn more with regard to a person's prognosis. However, I am of the belief, and what I've shared in spring break, that if post-accident someone has learned that with effort they can improve in a particular area, that there's no reason why that formula cannot continue to apply for the rest of their lives. In other words, there is no reason why they cannot continue to improve for the rest of their lives. And every single client I've spoken to and shared that with, I would make sure the next time I saw them, was there anything in their life that they got better at? Are they better at reading a page in a book and understanding it more quickly? Are they able to walk faster than they did before? Are you able to run faster than you did before? If you agree that with effort you're able to improve, given any prognosis, then that rule of thumb should apply throughout a person's recovery and lifetime.
And I think this is our final question, and it's a good question, I think, to end today with, is with all that you've been through and all that you have accomplished, what would you consider to be your greatest accomplishment?
Wow, well, thank you for asking that. So my greatest accomplishment is selecting my wife. I know that may sound very corny and mushy, but with my having been raised by a marriage counselor and psychologist, I grew up just hearing war stories about bad marriages and failed relationships. And I knew it was important that one day I hopefully select the right wife, and she selects me. And I'm grateful. It was actually, ironically, because of what happened to me, why I met my wife. I was in a bar one night. I wasn't driving, but I was learning how to walk. I was about 1.5 years into learning how to walk, and I was pretty good at it. But every month or so, I would trip for no reason. And I happened to trip in a bar, and I tripped next to this woman who noticed me because I tripped, and that's now been my wife of 22 years. So I recognize that a person's quality of life is derived primarily by their life at home. And if you have a significant other who brings you joy and doesn't make your life more difficult, you've had the best accomplishment you could possibly have. So that's my biggest accomplishment. Thank you for asking.
I love that. That's going to make me tear. You're making me cry twice today. And okay, we have one more last question. So I lied, but this is a good question. Someone wants to know, what is the best way for us to find out where a drunk driver was overserved? We usually follow the criminal case, but DA and criminal defense attorneys don't give that information. The reason I ask is we like to send preservation letters to establishments for credit card receipts, videos, etc.
I can answer that in a way that will hopefully be helpful, because that is a challenge in every state. And as everyone knows on this call, every state is different, but it still may be a mystery. So my advice is contact your local Mothers Against Drunk Driving, because that is one of the goals of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, is to determine just that. And I believe that will be your best first resource. And your local Mothers Against Drunk Driving chapter will have a direct contact with your state capital and where that data is kept, and with your state and local police departments for the data. If the data exists, your local Mothers Against Drunk Driving chapter will know.
Well, thank you, Stephen. I am honored to have moderated this today. It really, truly was special. So I thank you so much, and I will pass it back to Ginger to end us for today, but thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Absolutely. I tell you, it just means the world that you took the time today to be with all of us and to share your story. And it was very interesting to hear your perspective as a client and then also the lawyer. And I think our attendees really appreciated hearing like the different views. And honestly, I just want to say thank you again to all of our attendees who took the time to watch this today. And I hope that you are inspired the way that I was when I first heard Stephen speak. Please, I encourage you to reach out to Stephen, also Haley, if you guys have any questions. I know that was very kind of you to offer a complimentary copy of the book.
It's my law firm, Saperstein Salomon's gift to plaintiffs' attorneys out there that are doing so much for their clients. And if you send us an email with the contact information, it'll be our honor to send you the book, and also to just give you a connection to the state of New Jersey and the laws in our state. So.
Absolutely. And I wanted to say, Stephen, you know how you've been advocating for people, not to drink and drive and so forth. There's another trial lawyer who I'm not sure you know his name, but his name's Joel Feldman, and he does end distracted driving. Unfortunately, he lost his beautiful daughter several years ago to a distracted driver, and he's been sharing his stories with schools and organizations all across the country. But if you don't know him, I would love to get you guys connected.
I'd love to connect with him.
And definitely look it up, ndd.com or .org, but it's great organization as well.
Thank you.
And now, again, I would like to go ahead and share our contact information for our two incredible sponsors today. Again, we had, even though Kyle wasn't here, he did a great video for everyone with HMR. Please reach out to him, and I will email you this as well after the webinar ends. So thank you, HMR. And again, big thank you to Keith for joining us today with Global Litigation Consultants. You guys are more than welcome to reach out to them. They're doing so many great things over there, but he'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys have. And then I just wanted to say that we've got a lot more webinars coming up. If you haven't noticed, I've been adding new ones every single day. So just stay tuned and go to connectionology.com to sign up. And we will continue bringing you as much education as we can. And in the meantime, just take care. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. Stephen, Haley, thank you.
Thank you, Haley. Thank you, Ginger.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.